All right, so are you ready for Theology Corner, my friend?
Indeed.
Here we go. Alrighty, so what are we talking about today? We've already touched on it so much, but how would you summarize our theology topic for today?
Well, um, am I correct in saying that it's kind of been reflected in all of the themes except for the memes? Although I think there was one that caught my eye that might have been connected. Um, just how our Christian cultural engagements connect, where the where the streams collide, if you will. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on it a good bit. These are all really interwoven into the things we've covered, whether it's the headline or the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think in summary, like we're trying to figure out sort of what is a good theological outlook regarding
Mhm.
what Christian cultural engagement looks like. And so we talked about it in terms of the film. Like, what if you could go back to sort of what you were beginning to say? Like, what
Yeah.
does good Christian cultural engagement look like? Let's just say specifically in film. And what do we mean when we say that?
So, from I'll approach it from two angles. So, first, from the creative side, from the content creators, I think if you're a believer working in any art form, but specifically to movies, just make good films.
Mm-hmm.
Write compelling storylines. Don't rehash the same things. And I believe also that the worldview of a believer is obviously going to be inherently woven into the material, not in the sense of like, I have to make a movie that has a specific poignant message, but um, just that it's going to be part of it. Like you're going to be speaking from a specific starting point, so that's going to come across in the values, in the overall plot devices and whatnot like that. So, but it's not so much that I'm saying that if you were going to be a Christian filmmaker, you can only make movies that are kind of like those 1980s, 1990s Christian films where it was always the two high school kids, the one rebels and becomes an atheist, and the other one's like, Jesus, man,
The
it's
Buttercream
Jesus.
Gang. Remember the Buttercream
Yeah,
Gang?
there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
And
Do you
like,
think?
yeah, all that basic stuff, where it's like high level moralistic stories, that weren't really even all that compelling.
Right. Yeah. Do you think maybe the way this manifests itself is that um, kind of the more, like, for me, it's like the more integrated your Christianity is, the more you interact with the world
Yeah,
in an integrated way, where you address all aspects of life from that perspective, sometimes verbally and sometimes not. And
right.
so, in that sense, like, if you're not fully integrated with your faith, um, it's a compartmentalized thing. It's like, here's my Christianity. I feel like what it really means to be compartmentalized as a, like, having it internally and externally, is that you don't actually see, in a sense, there's a lack of faith there, in that you don't see Christianity as a reflection of the actual nature of the world. It's like there's the world, and it's the world is secular.
Yeah,
And then there's Christianity, and if it's going to stand out, it has to be very vocal and very plain, and that's why
right.
there's just this high level exposure of it in a not fully integrated Christian
Yeah.
movie, right? Does
Well,
that
I
make
mean,
sense?
wouldn't that outlook be like what some people would call like dualism? There's
Yeah,
the spiritual and then there's the secular, and never the
yeah,
two shall meet.
yeah. And
Um,
I think like Christians aren't fully defining their terms. Like, I think there's room, there's a useful there's useful room for the term secular, I suppose, depending how you use it. But like,
yeah,
maybe, but like, Christians don't.
not in the way that most people are using it.
Yeah, like, but like, I think Christians think secular, and they don't differentiate between like something secular and something fallen, or I don't know.
Hmm.
Am I thinking they make those synonymous, or they make them two separate? I'm trying to sort that out, but like, basically they see the world being secular. It's like as if there's aspects of life that are detached from spirituality. It's like,
That's that's what I've come into contact
Yeah.
mostly with is and grew up under.
Uh-huh.
Not I'm not making any digs at anybody, but it's just what I was familiar with. There was
Hmm.
the church world, and then there was the secular world, and we didn't listen to secular music. We didn't listen or watch secular movies. We
Hmm.
didn't go places based on whether it was Christian or secular. But
Right.
eventually you run out of options because I don't know of too many Christian burger places. I mean, Chick-fil-A, but whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it's sad when you have to have a Christian version of everything
Hmm.
rather than being Christian people
Yeah.
who have influence in broader society.
Yeah. And I guess I want to articulate this well because like this, what I'm trying to say, I talked about this with my gaming channel, like trying to fully engage in sort of the gaming hobby
Mhm.
as a Christian.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And it's like I can see how someone can take what I'm saying and abuse it and like use this as an excuse to engage in any media,
Mm.
because like they're, it's like, oh, so like there's not as strict of a secular sacred divide, therefore I can make the worst things sacred. Like there are things we should
Yeah.
avoid, but um, the point is the world is fallen. There's
Hmm.
fallen aspects of the world, but there's not secular aspects of the world. Maybe that's what
Right.
I'm what I'm trying to summarize, and that it's like we should be able to have the discernment to separate out something, an aspect of something, or the entirety of a something
Yeah.
that's fallen, and there's things you should avoid. But the point is, like, oftentimes these things are a twisting of a something that is good that God does want us to integrate in our lives because He gave it to us. Um,
Yeah.
and so, like, I remember the way this manifested itself was sort of an argument I got into, I think in a Facebook group. Someone asked, like, will there be video games in heaven? And I'm like, I kind of don't care necessarily, but whatever fun quote unquote things are in heaven, it's probably going to be some different version or other, like, and that's the thing. We're not actually looking. My main point was we're not actually looking forward to heaven. That's the
Hmm.
intermediate state before the renewal of the entire heavens and earth. And so there's going to be a physical future for us with all the trappings of life without sin.
Yeah.
Right. And so like someone often will answer that question, will there be video games in heaven or some hobby? Um, and they'll be like, oh, I think we're not going to be even thinking about that when we're in the presence of Jesus. And I'm like, um, or they'll say, well, do you think Jesus would play video games? Or something like that, where they're pitting it against not, they're actually pitting it against um, church services, basically. It's like
Right. Yeah.
all of heaven, the new earth is a church service. It's like I'm not interested in defending video games to the death. That's not the point. The point is
Right.
every aspect of life is going to be perfected in the new heavens and the
Yeah.
new earth. It
All
will.
one has to do is look at Adam and Eve before the fall. What I mean, were they just sitting like on clouds playing the harp? Like no, like they were actively doing what God had called them to do, which was to be fruitful and multiply. And I'm not saying they look exactly like that. I'm just saying like there was a before sin entered the world, they weren't just doing nothing. They
Right,
were active. They were doing things.
right, right.
I would imagine that a perfected humanity, glorified bodies, glorified new heavens, new earth,
Mm-hmm,
will probably have tasks. I mean, we're told we'll have charge over the angels. Angels
mm-hmm.
are messengers, so I imagine there's messages to be sent. Um, you know, like
Yeah,
there's all sorts of things I think that we'll be doing.
yeah. And I mentioned I would probably bring up eschatology. I think it relates. I mean, you're still sorting out your eschatology to an extent, but
Yeah.
like I've gone into mine as of late. I have this more optimistic post millennial view, at least for now, um, that I think I've landed on. But basically, like sort of this more recently, in terms of decades, more recently popular sort of dispensationalist view that's sort of rooted in the 1800s has this uh, theologically pessimistic view of the future that the devil is going to take over, right? And so basically, we're getting as many saved as we can before the Titanic sinks, is kind of the view. And therefore, in that sort of constant wartime pessimistic view, uh, cultural engagement is engagement with a culture in that perspective, it's a culture that is inevitably going to become more and more and more and more fallen. And so, like, I talked about a shallow conversation about something like video games that I had on this topic, and I find eschatology even informs that, because like when I say I want to enjoy this hobby or that hobby, it's like it's from that like staunch pessimistic theological view. Hobbies are much more suspect, I think.
Hmm.
Because like ultimately all you're doing is giving into a worldly distraction on the path to destruction, right? Rather than seeing yourself as like, again, bringing the more positive post millennial perspective. Um, the I think this is what it's talking about when it says the last enemy to be destroyed is death. The culture in this perspective, the future vision in the post millennial perspective is that Christ is putting all his enemies under his feet in the present tense. Might take thousands of years. We don't know. America may or may not survive that. We don't know. I'm not. Often we tie our eschatology to America and
Right.
current affairs or whatever. Point is, God, from this perspective, God is actually, over the course of time, with ups and downs, God is winning. And so culture can actually be won, and that sort of Adam and Eve creation mandate still has validity to an extent in that way. And so like we can give into worldly distractions in the sense of we can not prioritize our time well.
Right.
But that's different from saying that a given hobby is worldly in the sense that God doesn't have ownership over it. Right.
Right.
And so in that sense, something like movies or video games, pursuing those things either as a consumer or a creator can be a creative endeavor that actually is related to the kingdom of God, I think. And so you can see there is actually that very practical connection that results from your eschatology.
Yeah.
And so that's my rant on the matter. I don't know if it made sense.
Yeah. I think from where my perspective is as of right now, and again, as you mentioned, still sorting some things out. I probably lean towards a millennial eschatology at this point, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. But um, just by nature of the influences in my life, um, I tend to look at from the side of consumer engaging in culture as kind of in a in opposition to that more negative view that you spoke of, like the often found in the dispensationalist view. Um, I think there's a lot of redemptive qualities out there in cultural engagement, and I think it is a matter of being salt and light in areas that um, the church has once kind of spoken ill of, as touch not, um, be separate, to use some King Jamesian English here. Um, Whereas I see it as like, man, I can engage in things like, I don't do a ton of video games, but my daughter does. And so I've become more active in it because she's in it. And I'm, kind of re-engaging with it, whereas I probably had much more involvement in the years past in that, but I'm re-engaging in it just because she's so into it and I'm enjoying it. And um, I'm finding that this is fun. We enjoy it. It's something we do together. That's
Mhm.
redemptive. Like the fact that me and my daughter can spend time doing this together. That's redemptive.
No, when you
We
when you
enjoy it.
when you do it, it's idolatry, though. I'm sure.
When I do it by myself, it's idolatry. Yep, yep. Uh,
Yeah.
but there's all sorts of different ways that culture comes into play. It's not just movies, and it's not just video games, and it's not just books. I think of like the things that are around us where we live. May it be sports, may it be just getting out there and enjoying like some of the nature things. Now, I'm an active indoorsman, but my wife is an outdoors person. So we're trying to make it a point to broaden that and enjoy things. We're travel people. I run a travel agency. I do a podcast talking about travel. And there's another example, like kind of similar to your gaming live streams. I, I don't do like a Bible study coordinated with my with my travel agency podcast. I just highlight travel and the various things that you can do in certain places.
Well, then you're
Um,
obviously compromised. I mean,
and I am. I'm totally idolatrous there. But
uh,
like, can a believer totally enjoy those things? I think really what it boils down to is it's like one side is saying you can't enjoy things because it's too much of an idol. You're delighting in something that's not God. I say that God has made these things for our enjoyment, and so I think you
mhm.
should enjoy them.
Yeah, and they be a means to his glory. Like, I think
Yes.
one I think helpful sort of tip someone gave me in regards to whether or not an activity was permissible is like, what does your heart tell you when you ask if you can thank God for that thing?
Hmm.
Like, I can thank God for Super Mario. I would have trouble
Yeah.
thanking him for pornography,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's kind of, there's a lot of biblical principles that sort of come to light organically once you just
Yeah.
ask it as simply as that, I think.
And I've
Right?
found that a lot of people really paint with broad strokes with this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When they find out that someone is a cinephile, they love movies. They go, "Oh, so you only watch the rated R movie?" Like that. They just like paint with like broad strokes. Like, "Oh, you're so I know what kind of movies you're watching." If you're a video gamer, oh, so you only play things like Grand Theft Auto, and like they pick like the worst of the worst, and it's like you love food, so like this is my rebuttal. So I could say to that person, "Oh, you love food, so you must be an extreme glutton."
Mm-hmm.
Like, come on. Like, you can be a foodie without being a glutton,
Mm-hmm.
you
You know,
know?
it's something funny as an aside. Have you ever noticed like every culture somehow takes credit like they uniquely like food? I go to like, we say it all the time. Like my mom cooks really good Italian, and so like every
Yeah.
Italian family is like, "Hey, we're Italian, man. We love to eat." But like same
Yeah.
thing happens. Like I go somewhere else. Oh well, we're German. We love our food. We're Swedish. We love our food. I'm like, it's the same thing. I think
I
everybody likes
think
to eat,
I
man.
think if you were to meet the Norwegians would say, "We love everybody else's food,"
Oh,
because Norwegians don't have any good food.
oh man.
Now, I say that really tongue in cheek
Or the
because
British, the British.
they probably boast about it.
Oh man. So every culture has their one thing. So well, you got to have
Mhm.
this here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm from Western New York, so you got to get your pizza here. And your wings,
Pizza and wings.
piece of
Pizza
wings.
and wings. Yeah.
Uh, all right. So, any further thoughts on that? Any closing remarks? Anything we didn't touch on, or rants you wanted to go on?
Um, if you're a creator, create well. Do
Yeah.
your best. Pour your soul into it.
Hmm.
If you are a consumer, consume wisely, but enjoy. Like obviously consuming itself, like there's a lot of negative connotations to consuming.
Right.
I tend to
Consumer
be
culture.
yeah, I tend to be harsh on consumer culture related to interactions with the local gathering of the saints. I don't.
Mm.
I think we should be belongers, not consumers.
Right.
But just in general, like if it comes to like the things you enjoy doing, enjoy them, and in doing so, give glory to God. Not that you have to stop and hold a Bible study every time you watch a movie, and spend 2 hours on your knees thanking Him for that movie, but um, enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
And
This
obviously
is.
you.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can consume wisely in that vein. Like obviously, there's a lot of entertainment out there that is more harmful to a believer.
Yeah, and to me, like this is a video. I made a video on this. I've related it to the new heavens and the new earth and like things like this. But like, there's like a kind of a weird way in which Christians have not thought things through, where it's like they're pitting certain things against each other that God did not intend to be pitted against each other in regards to and they confuse a lapse in time management skills with a lapse in like uh love for the things of God, where it's like um and they do it selectively. So my example was like so you like to watch a movie. Okay, well, do you read the Bible as much as you watch movies? It's like, okay, so if I'm gonna go to a movie tonight, I have to read the Bible for 2.5 hours or whatever it is. That's what you're saying. So but we do that with a hobby, but we don't do it with like our job. Like I go to work for 8 hours every day. does that mean I'm a workaholic if I work more than I read the Bible? Right? It's
Yeah.
like we can have an argument or a discussion about what good time management is. Like, you shouldn't play video games more than you go to work, and you shouldn't play video games or watch a movie more than you spend time with your family or something. Like, there's time management issues, but comparing everything to a church service or a Bible study or daily devotions is like it's like almost a willful twisting of categories. It's like, obviously different parts of life were given to us by God, and they were meant to be prioritized differently. you know like, work is meant to take up most of your day on a weekday. That's the norm. And devotions are, I think, from the Lord. Like, there are there's some cultural things attached to that, but I mean, and some traditional things attached to that, but like, devotions are a good thing. And 15 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, people do them differently, but like, that's a good thing. But no one suspects that you do 8 hours of devotions a day to match your work schedule, to be more holy. It's like, certain forms of worship or doing things to the glory of God we understand they have different time slots that they take up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's an argument I had to think about that for a while, because these are the things I
Yeah.
ask, like, growing up, when people are making these platitudes or critiquing a certain hobby or whatever. They compare it, if they want to make you feel guilty, they compare it to your
Yeah.
devotional
Yeah.
time or something like that. It's like, you don't do that with anything else except for this hobby
Yeah.
you don't respect, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. And
Well,
so,
it's a legalistic argument that just is completely removed from grace, because
mhm,
it's I don't know. Mark Driscoll would have probably said it's spec and plank or whatever,
mhm.
that type of argument.
You just quoted
And
Mark Driscoll. Now you have to make a qualification.
heretic.
Yeah.
Um, might I suggest that maybe sometimes there's nothing more spiritual than, just enjoying an evening with your family,
Hmm.
enjoying an evening outside.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the best thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah. I think,
Spend
like,
time that way.
most Christians in a limited sense, they understand the idea of doing something other than going to church to the glory of God, right? Like, thank the Lord for, your new baby that was just born. Like, that's
Sure.
obviously, and they'll talk about, like, it was a holy moment when my child was born, and it was,
Yeah.
and uh, it's like, but in a lot of our tradition, we're unable to really spread that out to all areas of life,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, to actually recognize the beauty God creates in everything. Um, uh, Recognizing fallenness, recognizing the
Yeah.
corrupted nature of so many things, but knowing, like, this is still God's world, and it will be for eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that right there probably a great note to end the thought with is just, if the world is fallen, and we've made the point that it's not utterly corrupt.
Hmm.
Um, Imagine what a perfected version of this is, with
Hmm.
all these wonderful things, how creative God is and how creative he's made us to be. That's the genuine sign of creativity, is that a creative being created creative people.
Hmm.
So I would think that with the removal of the fallen condition, that these things will just become even more beautiful and wonderful. And so video games, movies, books, art, I mean, I can't imagine what music is going to be like. The creativity will be unleashed.